Hello and welcome to this new series of podcasts from Bravas. We've designed this podcast for our clients, our customers, and for our trade partners, whether they're designers and builders or architects, to talk about issues that we find and think will be interesting to them around getting technology into a luxury home. We're going to explore many different areas over the next few weeks, and we hope you'll find these are interesting. We'd love to hear your views and your thoughts on what makes this podcast interesting, or subjects you'd like us to cover. I'll be working with Keith Brown, one of my colleagues, and we welcome you to these podcasts, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you. I'd like to introduce the other host of this, Keith Brown. Keith, welcome to our first podcast. Why don't you start with telling the audience a bit about yourself and what you do for Bravas?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm Keith Brown. I'm in Dallas, and I'm a business development and marketing manager. So I help build relationships with our trade partners. It would be typically architects, designers, and high-end custom home builders.
Thanks, Keith. And also on the line from Baltimore is Sean Weiner. Sean is the general manager of our Baltimore location and is one of the brains behind Bravas. So good hello to you, Sean.
Hi, Nigel. Thanks for having me.
So I thought a good place maybe to start would be to say, when you hear about health and wellness, when you hear about that type of thing and home automation, what do you think?
Well, I think about the things that we do on a regular basis to automate a home and the dual purpose of those technologies, because they not just make our lives more convenient and simpler, they also give us the ability to make our homes a healthier place to live. Everything from, as we've discussed, lighting controls to the acoustics in the space, to motorized shading and control of light, to the actual lighting fixtures that are installed. There's many things that we do on a regular basis that wouldn't necessarily be obvious in their relationship to health and wellness, but they serve that purpose as well.
Yeah, and Keith, when you think about this from the sort of angle of designers, builders, and architects, and some of the trade partners that help us work with our customers, how do you think the idea of health, wellness, or whatever you want to call it is going down with them?
I think they find it a very important part of what they do. I think a lot of times their contributions are minimized. They're just putting furniture in a space. They're just deciding where the walls go, whatever it is. But they are very, very intelligent people who are very well trained in the art of making a home a better place to live. And so they've accepted it. They're really excited about the idea of using technology in the space to make it an easier place, a more healthy place for their clients to live. They love the idea.
Okay, so I think wellness and health seem to be a great subject. I want to try and break this down into 4 or 5 different areas that may be solutions, or areas that both customers and our trade partners should focus on. So, Sean, I thought we'd start with light. Can you talk a bit about why light might be the first subject we talk about when it comes to health and wellness and a whole happy home?
So light is essential to our being. It's essential to our wellness, to our lifestyles. Light impacts our sleep, our awake time, our attention span, and we get light from many different sources. But generally speaking, it's either natural light or artificial light. So when we're talking about lighting inside the home, we're almost always referring to artificial light, except for our window coverings, which are also part of the conversation. But making sure that lighting allows us to sleep when we want to sleep and be awake and alert when we want to be awake and alert, as well as becoming a decorative and relaxing element in the rest of our home is really important to the success of the project and to creating a well environment inside the house.
So, Keith, from a designer, builder, architect, from a trade partner point of view, do you think this is a subject they've all got their brains around yet?
I don't know that they fully understand how important it is, but when we talk about it, they're ecstatic about the idea. From an interior designer's perspective, everything that they put in a house is seen in the context of the light in that home. So if we can make the light beautiful, first of all, that absolutely benefits them. It makes their work look better. It helps the client to appreciate it. But they also understand that yes, this is a big part. It plays a big role. They understand it from an aesthetic point of view. Automatically, that's just something that they really grasp. So talking about it from a health and wellness point of view is a very natural segue for them.
One of the other subjects I hear people talk about a lot is lighting in terms of things like circadian rhythms. So, Sean, give us a sense of what all that's about and what people are doing.
Well, circadian rhythms really refer to the cycle of sunrise and sunset and how our bodies relate to that. So we've been trained throughout history that when it starts to get dark at night, we sleep. And our body creates a chemical called melatonin, which helps us inspire that sleep. If we live under fluorescent lights all day, our body doesn't produce that chemical, which makes it very difficult to sleep at night. So circadian rhythms occur naturally outside the home with sunlight, but they don't happen naturally inside the home. And there are a lot of lighting products now that allow us to simulate that inside the house, to stimulate those chemicals and allow us to sleep when we're supposed to and be alert when we're supposed to be alert.
If there was one thing around light, Sean, that a client or a customer building a new home should really think through, if you were to say just there's one thing you must do for lighting, what do you think it would be?
Consider the color of that light. Dimming is important, but dimming is only half of the equation because the color temperature of the light fixture is the most important thing. Color impacts the interior design of the house, but it also impacts the way we perceive the time of day and the way our circadian rhythms interact with our surroundings. So being able to vary that color or change that color or impact that color is critical.
Okay, so if lighting and shading, and we'll come back in a later episode, I think, to talk more about shading, but if lighting and shading is the first area, the second area that I think people think about when it comes to health and wellness in the whole home is sound and the role that sound can play. And how do you think people should approach thinking about both sound and silence in their home?
Sound is another one of those properties that we listen to sound outside and it fills the entire space. There's not many echoes when you're outside in the exterior of the house, but there can be inside the home. There's sound that transmits from devices between rooms, between spaces in the house. And being able to control the acoustics is critical. It's also important to think about things like music and background sounds to stimulate maybe natural sound in the space. A lot of people use sound machines when they sleep at night because it gives them a calming presence in the space when it sounds like they're sleeping in nature underneath the stars. And the same applies to music. Some people have very visceral reactions to music, and they use that music in their home to create a more relaxed environment. But then acoustical properties to keep sound from transmitting between spaces and between adjacent rooms. For privacy, we're all working from home now, so even being able to pay attention to what you're focused on and not hear external noises from the adjacent room is important. So there are many, many things we can do with sound and with silence throughout the home.
Keith, I'm guessing this is also something that builders care a lot about.
Yeah, I think it is. It's something that we can really help educate them on. One thing that we've learned is that the homes that clients are asking to build, which are all hard surfaces, smooth finishes, lots of glass, lots of metal, those homes are inherently poor acoustically. So by just getting involved early on in a conversation with a client and the builder, we can help solve some of those issues. We can help reduce the amount of time that sound reverberates around the space. We can help them decide which rooms might need treatment to keep sound from passing from room to room, like Sean mentioned. I would say it maybe isn't something that is really important to them because it's not something their clients are bringing up, but it is a really easy way we can help them build a better home.
Also, I think from an artistic point of view, Sean, there's a lot of things people can do with decorative surfaces, isn't there, to improve the sound within the rooms?
Yeah, there's plenty of natural materials that absorb and diffuse sound to help with the room acoustics. So we can use very basic fabric-wrapped acoustical panels, which aren't always the nicest looking products in the room, but they're also natural materials like wood and glass and stone that can be used in those scenarios to improve room acoustics. And it's a great thing, like Keith mentioned, to talk to the interior designer, the architect, and even the builder about. So during the construction process, we can take those things into consideration.
Also, there must be an element for people building homes where they think about wiring, sound into every room. Do you sense that people building a proper modern automated home have made sound in every room a feature, or has sort of standalone devices started to end the world of sort of piped in sound across the house?
I think there's been a combination of both, Nigel. I think that for people who are concerned about the quality of the audio, having the sound wired and built into the home is a far superior option than having portable devices sitting on countertops and on desktops. That said, there's a proliferation of both devices. The wireless devices do give us the ability to get sound into places that haven't been wired or don't have the ability to be wired in existing homes and existing structures. So it can be a benefit as well, and all those things can be augmented to sound better if need be when performance is of the utmost importance to the client.
Okay, so we talked about light and we talked about sound. I think one of the things that maybe is even more sensitive to most of us after the last few weeks of our lock-in and our changes, the climate or the environment in which we live in. As people are building homes, Sean, what do you think they should be thinking about in terms of climate?
Well, climate includes, in my opinion anyway, air quality. So there's the temperature of the air, which is important. We've all used programmable thermostats in our lifetimes. There are humidity elements to it to make sure that we live in a comfortable setting, and it protects our furnishings and our woodworking and our artwork, or dehumidification in some cases if that's an issue. But also odor filtration and air filtration in the space. We've all heard of HEPA filters, which were originally used in hospitals. There are filtration devices that are far more sophisticated and actually filter out way more particles than a traditional HEPA filter will that can be installed as part of the heating and air conditioning systems and the air movement systems in the home, to not just filter out odors and volatile chemicals in the air, but also, as we're seeing right now, viruses and similar bacteria in the air.
So I'm thinking that for many of the builders that we talk to, Keith, this is an area they're probably most comfortable with talking about, HVACs and that type of technology. How do we extend the thinking to cover some of these other areas?
It's a good question. I think the best thing for us to do in the past has just been have conversations. A lot of times AV companies are pigeonholed as AV companies, but by asking questions about how are you handling air quality and just letting them know that we can help monitor air quality within the home, it starts to bring up conversations about things like HEPA filtration and UVC treatments and all of these other ways that we can help improve air quality and improve health. But it's got to start with that conversation so they're aware the technology is there and that there's a solution to help their clients.
Okay, so let's add in all three of us to this conversation. I want to talk a bit about the next area, which I think is an unusual area, which is an area of clutter that, for many of us, I know at least for me, if I have too many cables lying around, I get into trouble at home. How does clutter change the way we think about health? Sean, have you seen people try and do things to get around that?
So I have, and we're not known as the declutterers of the home building process when it comes to things on the countertops and on the floors. But that said, we do declutter walls. So there's a lot of situations where you'll see a wall full of light switches or control devices or alarm keypads. There's technology on virtually every wall in the house, including lighting. And we can do a good job in the design process of minimizing that clutter and minimizing the chaos that surrounds them, and knowing which button to press or which device to move toward. And we can certainly help with that mindset and making things simpler and cleaner, easier to operate, and easier to be around on a regular basis.
I think the other thing we can probably do is hide some of this stuff, can't we? What have you seen in terms of the way people hide things like televisions to clean up the look of a room?
Oh, everything. So televisions can be concealed in a number of different ways behind paintings and moving artwork. They can be concealed inside cabinets, behind sliding panels and moving doors. They can be flush mounted to a wall or a cabinet surface. They can be recessed into stone enclosures. They can be popped up out of the floor, dropped down out of the ceiling. But that also applies to things like speakers. So there's many different types of flush mount speakers available. They can be everywhere from barely invisible to completely invisible. Same thing goes for subwoofers and other components that we provide. So virtually everything we do can disappear or almost disappear into the background of the home.
So Keith, from when we talk to designers and maybe architects as well, do you think this is an area they're sensitive to, or growing more sensitive to, or really just aren't even considering yet?
I think they're beyond sensitive to it. I think a lot of times interior designers don't want to bring an AV company in because they're worried about how we're going to change the aesthetic of the room. Unfortunately, kind of like I say over and over again, the earlier we get involved in those conversations, the more options we have. It's amazing that right now you could do a motorized TV coming out of someone's cabinet for the same price as just buying a flat screen TV a few years ago. It's just not that expensive as long as we plan ahead and start asking questions early on, so we can work with the trim carpenter, so we can work with the floor plan of that space, and incorporate the technology in a way where it really does just seamlessly blend in. Hey, Sean, how do you think video distribution helps you when it comes to decluttering the house?
Oh, wow. It's actually a great tool. Thanks for reminding me of that, Keith. So what it allows us to do is move the gear and the equipment that's initially scheduled to go in every room and every location, usually in a piece of furniture somewhere in or around the television set, and move it to a different location, which is primarily our component rack location. So it cleans up not just the componentry, but the wiring, even the cabinetry and the furniture that's no longer required in that space. It makes for a much cleaner looking installation.
Yeah, definitely the aesthetic clients are looking for right now.
You know, one of the things I guess I was probably more surprised about when I joined Bravas is how many of our clients actually have, you know, racks of technology that maybe years ago you would have seen in a data center installed somewhere in the home. Sean, that must be a way that we're helping to not only clean up some of that mess, but makes it easier for us to support afterwards, I'm guessing.
It does. Centralizing the location of the components in a home makes it easier for us to service. We're not moving from room to room. We're not worried about running cables from room to room. They're all centralized in a single location. It does keep everything neat and organized and easily labeled for both local service and also remote service. Once that's documented and we can access those systems remotely, it's good for us to know where things are and how they're connected. And we know we have a consistent product when we can centralize the location of those devices.
Okay, so let's move on to the last area, which we've sort of called peace of mind, which says there are all sorts of issues around, and this I think is more than alarm systems. There's security and surveillance and those sort of systems. I wonder, Sean, how hard is it to integrate that into the rest of your home nowadays?
Now it's actually much simpler than it's ever been to integrate surveillance and security into the systems that we install. The iPhone and the Android phone have given us all an overwhelming amount of notification capability. But what it means is you can stay in touch with your home and the surroundings and what's going on without being in the home. So you can have as much information or as little information as you'd like at your fingertips. So if the UPS driver drops a package at the front door and you want to be notified that he's arrived and have a photograph or a video of that box, you can absolutely do that. If that's too much information, you can turn that notification off for a period of time or indefinitely. But it also gives you the ability to see who's coming and going. So who's armed and disarmed the security system, which family members, contractors have come and gone from the property, when they've arrived, when they left. And it gives you the peace of mind of knowing that you can see your home while you're not there and be notified if something's happening. And the new camera analytics capabilities give us even more capability to differentiate in a video field. The computer knows whether it's a vehicle or a person or an animal, and can send or notify based on that information instead of just sending a bulk of notifications that show you photographs of raccoon and deer on your front porch.
And actually that brings up another point, which is this isn't only for inside the house as well, is it? I mean, you can start to use this technology to manage remote buildings, to manage your landscape. There's all sorts of ways this extends from just an alarm in your house, isn't there?
It is, and it's a notification system as much as it is a security system. So I think you use the term peace of mind, which I think is ideal for this. So everything from security, traditional security functions and alarm functions and surveillance functions to things like water sensors and notifications if the garage door has been opened, remote door locks, thermostat control when it's been adjusted can be notified. So all those notifications give you an understanding of what's happening in the home, whether you're in the home or you're away from the home.
So, Keith, if we were talking to a designer or an architect who's really putting together a home for the first time for a client, and we brought up peace of mind, what sort of advice would you give to them of the things they should think about to tell their clients?
You know, I think it's interesting because a lot of times that's one of the things they're focused on, especially with architects. They're involved very early, and they're building something that's aspirational for their client. They're something they expect to be proud of, something they expect their client to take a lot of pride in. So they bring up those things for us a lot of times. It's just knowing if we have the solutions or not. What I typically recommend to them, most of our clients would say, I'm not paranoid. I don't need a lot of cameras. But when you ask about things like knowing where your family is, knowing if someone's been by the pool, knowing if someone's come and gone from the house, that is something that's very, very attractive to just about everyone. I can't think of a client that has turned down the idea of knowing what's going on in their home, either when they're not there or from the areas of the home they're spending the most time.
So Keith, if you were with one of our trade partners who was working with a potential client of ours, and you wanted them to focus on the well-being of the whole home, of the house, the health side of it, where would you tell them to start? Well, we talked about 5 areas. That's a lot. Where do you think it's best for people to start?
Yeah, I think the lighting and shading probably for me is the place to start. One, it affects a lot of other areas of, it gives you privacy. Like having shades can give you privacy. Having lighting control can help remove clutter from the walls. So just that one area touches so many of these different ideas. But we always talk about things like circadian rhythm lighting or human-centered lighting. Yes, for some people it may be aspirational, but it brings up a conversation of, do you want the house to benefit you and work for you, or do you just want to live in it? But we have technologies that can really help a client live better in their home. And if by bringing that up, we end up with dim to warm lighting instead of circadian rhythm, we've still given them something much better than they had beforehand.
So explain dim to warm lighting, because that's I think an important change that's happened in lighting, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. So dim to warm lighting is simply inside your light fixture, there are multiple LEDs. So as you dim the lighting, it moves to a warmer end of the spectrum, just like an old incandescent bulb did, where you got that nice, warm, orangey, firelight glow out of it as you dimmed it down. But if we combine dim to warm lighting with a SmartHome lighting system, lighting control system, we can automatically dim the lights in the evening so that they get that warmer light. So they get some of those advantages of that circadian rhythm, human-centric lighting, but just maybe at a more attainable price point.
So, Sean, when you're talking to a potential client, how do you bring up the subject of health and wellness? Where do you start?
It depends on the client a little bit, but it also depends on their interest in that subject. But it's one of the benefits on the list of the technologies that we offer. So if you're interested in pursuing or purchasing a lighting control system simply because you want one button by the front door to turn all your lights off, there's a health benefit that can be associated with that system as well. And that's a big part of that conversation. For clients who do have an interest in health and wellness as being part of the build of their home, the lighting controls and the lighting in the home are probably paramount for the success of that project.
Great. Well, listen, thank you to both of you for that great content. Sean, one of the things we're going to try and do with everybody who joins us on this call is ask them sort of the same 3 questions. So we'll start with you and we'll see if we can make this work. The first of the 3 questions is, what's the piece of home technology or home automation that you don't think you could live without?
So I installed a lighting control system in a home that I built about 15 years ago, and I haven't lived in a home without one since. Once you get used to the convenience of it, walking around and pushing light switches around the house just doesn't seem like a realistic option anymore.
Okay, second one. Do you think the best or most interesting job you or your team have ever been involved in? What's the sexiest thing you guys have worked on?
Oh, there's so many. I think that the one that comes to mind right away is one we finished very recently, which included some Ketra lighting on a beach house. So it's an oceanfront home. It faces east, so it's got some great morning sun. But as the sun rises up over top of the house, it gets a little bit darker inside during the day. And the lighting system that we installed allows us to keep the same color temperature inside as outside. So it feels like the sun is shining inside the house even when the sun is up over top. It adds a whole new dimension to the home. So it's an application of technology to control lights, but wow, it makes an unbelievable difference for the client, the way that they live in that home right now.
Okay, and the third question is, what's the piece of technology, home automation, that hasn't been invented yet that you would really like? Can you think of one?
It's funny you ask. There's it's become a joke, but what I've always dreamed of is the button that does what I'm thinking. So if I had an opportunity to push a button and make whatever was going on in my mind happen inside my home, that would be my dream. So hopefully Amazon and Google and Facebook and Apple will get on top of that soon.
Sounds like a
I'm
splendid
sure they're working
idea.
on it.
Exactly. So, Keith, from you, if there are designers, builders, and architects joined us, where can they get more information about Bravas?
They can go online. www.bravas.com would be a good place to do it. And I think if you type Bravas into Instagram or Facebook, you're going to find us.
Thank you to everybody for joining our first podcast. We would love to hear your feedback, positive or negative. We'll flash on the screen an email account for you to respond to. If you found us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. There's more to come. With that, I'll wish you a happy, healthy, whole home.